Hi, Danica. This is Linda. Thank you for your patience about getting your feedback. I know that you've already submitted your final draft, but what I want to offer you is the opportunity to take a look at the feedback on this final draft. And if you want to resubmit it with some corrections from my suggestions or some other revisions or editing that you do on your own, you may do so, and then I will regrade that. Um, I'd like you to have that. If you do redo it, I'd like you to have it redone within the next 24 to 48 hours. Anyways, let me talk to you about your essay. The format looks pretty good. I do recommend that you single space this. It is just the format that is prescribed in our division and in MLA. You have a title, your margins look good, um, and your paragraphs look pretty good. I'm going to go through and explain to you a little bit about what I've marked here. The red lines are just things that you can correct in terms of language, vocabulary, grammar, things like that. The pink highlights indicate things that I just really love and I think are wonderful touches. The green highlights represent what I think is the main ideas of your essay as well as the main ideas of each paragraph. And I think those are all the marks. Oh, and these little blue marks usually indicate that you should start a new paragraph, or they may indicate that you have maybe to look at a whole paragraph instead of just one or two lines in it. Okay, so let's start from the top. I'll try to do this quickly. I like how you start this off with a very specific memory with your son. I think that it's very nice. I think it would be nice to have a little bit more detail, like your son's name and maybe a memory of what he looked like, the feelings that you had as you held him, things like that could really make this paragraph pop even more. I love this dialogue here, and then you get right into what your big idea is, and that is that his love for reading came from being read to. Again, with talk about your older son, having a name could be nice. If you don't want to give their actual name, you can give a false name. It's okay. So this red sentence, let's take a look at that for a minute. I get that the message is clear. It's not that it's not clear, but the wording and construction of the sentence is off. I'm just going to read it out loud to you. I am a preschool teacher now, and that experience I had with my own children made me realize how different each child can be, each learning experience can be, and how different individual learning styles can be. So I get what you're saying. You had this realization, and I think this is an important part of this paragraph. But the construction of it is you've got these verbs kind of hanging on the end here, which isn't a really great idea. So here's just a suggestion. Looking back, I feel silly that I would think that teaching someone to read is the same for every individual. Now that I'm a preschool teacher, and in combination with my experiences with my own children, I now know how different each child's learning experience can be, how different each child's learning experience and learning styles. Let's see, I'm doing the can be just like you. Let's see, now that I'm a preschool teacher, I realize how the individual learning experiences and learning styles influence the way children learn to read or learn to do whatever it is that you're talking about. This, and then you need to tell me what this means, specify this knowledge about teaching, this knowledge about learning has made me, I believe, a better teacher of young children. Now, I highlighted this as awkward because going from this big, awesome idea, this big central idea, right into talking about being pregnant is a bit jarring for the reader. Now, as I get into it, I understand why you did that. It's not that that's not understandable, but it doesn't have a good flow to it. It's not a good transition. And one of the things we have to be careful of in academic writing is our transitions between paragraphs. Like, how do they hook up together? How do they have a flow to them? And so you want to take it with an idea that's somewhat connected. So you've gone from being a better teacher, and I would think that you probably want to mention that first. You could say something along this lines instead of, I remember when I first got pregnant. Before I ever became a teacher, when I was first pregnant, I saw a commercial on television. That's all it is. It's like kind of rehashing what you said before. Does that make sense? And now I'm not sure if that happened before you were a teacher or not, so you'll have to figure it out that way. But you need to say something that's a transition. So I'm just going to say, add a transition to that beginning of this paragraph, so it's not so jumpy and awkward. And then I would also recommend that this is a new paragraph, because we have this memory of before he was born and then when he was 2, and so I would just go ahead and break it apart. And once again, we've got a lot of these pronouns in here. He, I, he. Usually when we use pronouns, we want to have what's called an antecedent before them. Then that is, pronouns rename nouns. And when we just only use pronouns, it makes writing really vague and non-specific. So if you would, like if your son's name was Abraham, you could say, Abraham would be so excited to see shelf after shelf of books. This one, he would say excitedly. I decided to go ahead and check out about 20 books at a time, specify. And Abraham would sit for hours after we got home looking at the pictures quietly on the floor. So what we're doing is we're kind of blending pronouns and concrete nouns. It helps the reader to kind of keep track of who is who, especially if you're kind of recounting different stories in here. And then it also helps us to have a better transition to the next paragraph. And then this is just awkward here. We would snuggle in his nice warm bed, and almost every time our cat would crawl in to listen. It just looks weird in writing. It makes sense when if we were talking, but it's not good academic construction. So I would say, as we snuggled in the nice warm bed, our cat would crawl in to listen. And that's all you have to say. Almost every night, our cat would crawl in to listen. You don't have to say the too, okay? So then we're back to this main idea. He expressed how much he wanted to read, and you continued to read to him. And then kindergarten came. And once again, we have this reading and then kind of a jumpy transition. So we need a transition between these two paragraphs, from him being in preschool and being read to at night. I continued to read to him every night until he started his first day of kindergarten. It would be something that simple. Now, all these little circles here are, okay, these two up here have to do with comma splices. You cannot connect sentence pieces together just with a comma, and comma rules can be confusing, but I recommend that you look it up in the handbook, the little seagull or little gator handbook, and read a little bit about comma splices. Um, I would say maybe put a period here instead. The closer the day came, comma, the more excited, Abraham was became about what, I love this sentence about leaving your heart there, but I remember dropping him off and feeling like I left my heart there. And what I want you to do, okay, so now what I've done is I've made all these little circles here because I want to see more sentence variety. If you notice, you're starting off all your sentences with the same I remember, I knew, I would, I asked, I laughed, I remember, I asked. And it's very listy, and it sounds like a list rather than narration. So it's just about kind of changing things up a little bit. As I dropped him off, I felt like I left my heart in the classroom. You could take off the I knew. You could just take this off altogether and listen to how whoops, I guess I can't do that. Sorry. You could just say, he was in good hands, and, comma, and I would see him in a few hours. So now I just have one I in that sentence. When he arrived home later in the afternoon, instead of saying I asked, you could say I inquired, or I don't know, maybe I guess you have to say I asked there. He said rather matter-of-factly, good, but I didn't learn to read yet. Laughing, I told him it might take a while, and he looked at me sideways like I was crazy. So you can just take those I remember, those are all kind of telling things, and just make it very present. And then we come back to main idea, and we have another main idea. My first child did not need this support from me. He picked up reading and very naturally. This is confusing. And once again, I'd like to see you try to, use some names if you can, so we can differentiate between the children. Here we've got that construction again. I learned, I labeled, I continued. Let's try to pull that out a little bit. This is just kind of insight. Then you come back to your big idea, which would be your thesis, and then we get to the end, which is nice. I love this last part, and I do understand that. So, in a nutshell, you need to work on transitions between paragraphs. You need to remove the excess pronouns that are in this essay. You need to have more concrete words instead of just pronoun use. Pronouns represent specific nouns. They are meant to just rename them, and if you haven't ever named them in the first place, then they become vague. I think those are the two biggest problems with the essay. In terms of content and development and all that, I think you do a great job. You clearly have a mature writing style and a sense of what an essay should be. So what we're really talking about here, Danica, is refinement. And I hope that this feedback helps you. And I'm sorry again that it's so late. Thank you so much.